Okay, Adam, I thought you were gonna start, but I can definitely start.
Well,
So,
Hallie, I think people are here for you. They're not here for me because you're really the talent in the group. So I wanted you to kind of just jump into this and see where it takes us.
okay, cool. So, thank you everyone for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hallie Warner. I'm the Chief of Staff at Adam Hergenrother Companies, and we also have Adam Hergenrother on the call. And we are going to be talking about communication best practices between the founder and the force multiplier today for about 30 minutes. If you have any questions, just put those in the question box. I will get to those at the end of the call.
Awesome. Well, thanks for jumping in there. Again, thanks for being here, everybody. I'm Adam Hergenrother, and we're excited to kind of jump into the communication strategies for founders and force multipliers. And while we have a lot of cool things that we've done, we've also failed a ton. So we're excited and to really kind of walk you through things that we've tested over the many years we've worked together, and the challenges and the successes and relationships. Every day is a challenge and a struggle, and we get that. And so how do you build a relationship, right? What is a strategic partnership? How do you build a relationship that allows you and your force multiplier, in my case, right, or a force multiplier and a founder, to create a partnership that allows you to have the conversations that get challenging, to continue to push yourself out there, and to really find a way to force multiply your business. So let's kind of jump into the definition in our world of what is a strategic partnership, right? So you have mutually beneficial business relationship, right, where parties work together towards a common goal. Now, it's a really sexy way of saying that essentially, when I ever look at this, is Hallie and I have essentially the same job, right? I say the same job. We're on the same project. We're working on the same activity. It's just what part of the project does somebody work on? For instance, we talk about the 0 to 10 principle in our book, and I may take a project from 0 to 1, and then Hallie and or Amy takes it from a 2 to a 9, and then I take it from a 9 to a 10, or somewhere around there. So when you're looking at a common goal, you're working together on the same project. You're just doing different pieces of it. It's like if you're building a house, it's not like one person necessarily does all the HVAC, the excavation, the electricity, the plumbing, the flooring. You have different people working towards a common goal to get together to end up with a product that people are extremely happy with, right? And then you have your business partners, right? You need each other to survive and thrive, and not just from an ability of an output standpoint of what you're producing, but you need each other from the conversational standpoint of things get challenging and really tough when you're building a big business. When you're going out there to build something or start an entrepreneurship or jump into it or taking over a division or whatever it is that you're going set out to accomplish, you need each other to be able to bounce ideas off. And if you can think in a strategic partnership way, meaning you're aligned in the same direction towards that common goal, it makes those conversations much easier, right? Each party is committed to dedicating time and resources to the partnership. Right? This is rooted in their strengths, right? Which part of you is doing part of the project, but you're both committed to seeing it through and working together to make sure that each one of your thinking is in line and challenging the thinking between each person, right? So that you can continue to end up with the best product or service, whatever that common goal is, right? And then this goes without saying, but you're accountable for each part of the contribution deliverables. So when you set a goal, who's going to do it, you're very clear on what that looks like and how people are continuing to push their hands forward with it. So each party is extremely accountable for the contribution deliverables of there. We also have to have exceptionally clear and consistent communication. We're going to dive into this a little bit later with, obviously this webinar is about communication strategies, but it's really clear to have consistent communication. And if you have consistent communication, people are staying in lockstep. Last month we were doing some, I think it was April Stress Awareness Month or whatever it was, maybe Hallie can correct me, but it talked about 43% of people in the workplace are stressed out because of a lack of clarity. And a lack of clarity from the leaders or the vision, right? So how clear are you being? 43%, it's almost half, right, of people that work are stressed out because of lack of clarity alone. So are you being clear and consistent, right, with your messaging and your communication style? And then, respect and trust. This goes to create a strategic partnership. in the forum how we define this, and that you're force multiplying whatever it is that you're after and working on, you have to have respect and trust. You have to respect each other that you're actually going to get the things done, right? The deliverables that we talked about. And you have to trust each other, and not just from like, you know, hey, I'm telling you a trade secret. I mean, trust that, you know, things are going to get completed, and you have trust that this person's not going to go and stir up drama. It's like, I always like to think of trust as like the vault, right? When people can see you as a vault, the more they want to put in. And the more the information, the more input that you get that way, the more you can use that information to synthesize a strategic plan and actually move forward that way. So think about, in terms of when people tell you things, it's like a vault, boom, it just shuts. And the more that happens, the better off you're going to be, because the more input that you're going to have.
Awesome. So yeah, the one thing I would add to the trust is that it goes both ways, right? So there's that trust to the vault, to the EA. The EA has that trust in the executive that there's a vault, and also that the executive will have the EA's back, which I know doesn't always happen. So it's building that respect and trust.
I love it.
Cool. So let's talk about what a force multiplier is. Obviously, this is the title of our book, and I think it's a fairly new concept, although I'm seeing it pop up more and more in articles about chiefs of staff and executive assistants. But here's what our definition of a force multiplier is. It is, in our opinion, it's usually an executive assistant or a chief of staff. Now, when the founder is first starting a company, it's the solo entrepreneur or solopreneur, and they don't have anybody. Their first person might be their force multiplier, and that could come in the form of an ops manager or a personal assistant or a bookkeeper. But as that individual is growing and building a company, they're leveraging more. Ultimately, that force multiplier is really going to be in the form of an EA or a chief of staff. It's typically the right hand to the founder or CEO of an organization. It's somebody who manages the executive's priorities and ensures that his or her vision is executed. They maximize and extend the reach of the executive and help provide influence on their behalf. And this is back to what Adam said a minute ago, that they have that one vision, one mission, one job to get done. They're each just doing different pieces of it, which is how the force multiplier is a little bit different than, let's say, an operations manager or a COO. That person is actually not working on the same things that the executive is working on. So that's how we define force multiplier, versus an EA or chief of staff who is working on the same things as an executive, whereas an ops manager or COO might be kind of managing a specific division.
Love it. All right, so you now have your force multiplier. And one of the things that we really have to make sure that we're purposeful on is setting clear expectations. And these are, again, it goes back to that, you know, the lack of clarity can create so much stress, particularly if I'm speaking from a founder standpoint, and Hallie can talk from a force multiplier standpoint. But from a founder standpoint, at least for me, you guys may not suffer from this as much, but in my head, I can see the side angle, the left angle, the front and the rear of where we're going. And I don't always articulate it, right? And I can see it in my head, and I'm like, why can't everybody else see this as clearly as everybody else can? So the more a force multiplier, and Hallie does this, she pulls all that out, right, from what's in my head into a more of a strategic roadmap for exactly how to get there. And this allows clear expectations with this. So part of it is we use what's called, you know, user manual, which is just idiosyncrasies of people, how you win with them. People need to know what a scoreboard is. They need to know what the scoreboard is, how they win with you, right? How each person wins with each other. Expectations dialogue, right? If something comes up, is this an email? Is this immediate? Is this a scheduled thing? What is the expectation here? Because it's going to show up, right? How do you handle that? You're establishing very clear job description and ownership over business functions. So who's doing what and where, so you're not overlapping. One of the things that I see in businesses in general, not in any organization that's out there, is that you have way too many people overlapping the circles, which especially as things get larger, whereas you can trim that down and give ownership over a very clear job so people can take it and run it as far as they can in their organization, and then they can turn it over. But not having multiple people doing the exact same thing, right? It's a dilution of time and energy that causes a wastefulness, right, of available resources to go out there and build a product or a service in a different way. You got to set standards, right, for hours, time off, and availability. I have a client that I was working with this week who's making a big EA force multiplier hire. Not, he's got LM and TC hires. So as Hallie explained before, not necessarily an LM or TC hire, he's hiring an actual force multiplier. And one of the standards that we talked about was he works the weekends, and he did not go over the expectation with the fact that his force multiplier wants the weekends off. And so I said, look, you understand, it's fine if you're okay with that, but let me tell you from experience that you may be okay with that for the first 60 or 90 days, or maybe even the first year, but if they stay with you, at some point that's gonna bother you. So you just have to be very clear when you're making the hire, or you're transitioning somebody from one position into a force multiplier role, that you're setting very clear standards around hours. And for me, it's if I'm on, that person needs to be on too. Now, it doesn't mean that every weekend somebody's going to be on there, but if I'm traveling and it's midnight, I mean, there's many times that I can think of where Hallie was up at 2, 3 in the morning, or Amy has been dealing with at 10, 11 o'clock at night from delayed travel, right? Personally or business wise, because they have that information, they can do it. So just be very clear in what that means to you as a founder or a force multiplier, and make sure that's a fit. Because if it's not a fit, you can't put a Band-Aid on that for a period of time, because at some point it's going to bother you, and you're just going to have resistance on that, right? Create clear wins. Again,
to that.
Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to add is that, because I hear this conversation with EAs a lot about boundaries, and I want, how can they expect me to work all of this time, et cetera, et cetera. And this is coming from me, a force multiplier, saying this to other EAs, like, you don't have to agree to it. It just doesn't mean it's the right fit. I believe that the executive can set whatever crazy schedule they want to, and as long as they're communicating that to you, you have a choice to either say yes or no. So it's not your necessarily responsibility to change for the EA. You just probably don't have the right fit.
Love that. Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's kind of like you can use the example of Wall Street. It'd be like going down on Wall Street and working down there and saying that you want to work 30 hours, not have your weekends, right? It just wouldn't even be a pot. People don't think of it that way, right? Or you become an athlete and you're like, I want my Sundays off, but I play football, right? Like, I mean, the game's on Sunday. I mean, it's a little egregious, but you get the point, right? There's expectations set in industries, and there's expectations set in businesses, and there's expectations set between the founder and force multipliers. So thanks for sharing.
There are plenty of executives who do just work a 40-hour week and have a set schedule. So just go align yourself with that person.
Exactly. Yep. And then schedule quarterly reviews. Now, look, quarterly reviews are not something that I love to do. I just don't. I sometimes when I see them in my calendar, even a couple weeks in advance, I'm going like, oh man, I just had this. Like, it seems to be coming up here. But I'll tell you, every time that you just kind of make peace with that you need to do these quarterly reviews with the people that are touching you, you find really key insights, right? You talk to them, and there's usually 3 or 4 questions that I ask people in advance to think about. And so that we're coming in there, we're having purposeful conversations about what they did right, what they did really well, where are they still struggling a little bit, and if you were the owner of the company, what would you do differently, or where do you see the direction of the company, something along those lines. And it changes a little bit for each person. But you're just doing these quarterly reviews, and then you touch base with them comp-wise, because you want to know where people are. You don't want it to be a surprise to you, right? If somebody leaves because comp, right? So you should be having that kind of conversation. Are you happy with what this is? If not, how can we do it? How can we work towards it? Can we be creative? Instead of pretending those conversations from your employees don't happen, right? They do, right? They're thinking about these type of things. So just make sure you're both clear and agree to these standards and expectations. That's the most important part. That's what Hallie's emphasizing there, is make sure that you're very, very clear on standards, not just an emotional conversation, like a numeric one, right? Like, how do you bring this back to, I work these hours, right? Instead of saying, hey, I work a lot, because working a lot may mean 45 hours, one person, 80 to somebody else. So bring it back down to a number to make sure that you're very clear, because everyone understands what 8 means versus what a lot means, right? And then again, bring it down to writing. Bring everything down that you're talking about and get it in writing and get it signed off on, so that if it does becomes a disagreement, you can always go back to that document, right? I mean, we talk about agreements. I don't know why they're called agreements. They should be called disagreements, because the only time you need an agreement is when you're in disagreement, and that's when you bring out the agreement, right? Anything else, Hallie?
Yeah, not on that. So did you want to cover this? I'll go over this pretty quickly. So all those communication strategies are fantastic, and here are some of the things that we actually implement, the tools that we use on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to actually facilitate all of these conversations that are so important. The first one is behavior and personality profiles. Adam's going to go over those in just a second, and why those are so important. We use a tool called a user's manual, which we'd be happy to send you after the call. Again, it just kind of goes over idiosyncrasies, weaknesses, strengths. It gets everyone on the same page and having the same information on how to best communicate with somebody else. This is a really key one, is establishing communication channels. So Adam and I only really communicate in person and on email. Yet I know that if I need a very quick answer, if it's something that's a little bit more confidential, I will text him. But again, texting hardly ever happens, and we don't ever speak on the phone. Those are the communication channels that have worked for us, and that's what we keep. So just establish what those are for you and your executive. We do weekly one-on-one meetings. We use a tool called a 411. Those meetings happen every Monday. In the beginning, they happened for an hour because we just had a lot to cover, and it took us a little longer to kind of get on the same page for everything. And now there's quick 30-minute weekly meetings, and then we just go forth and execute the rest of the week. Sometimes daily check-ins work really well for people, either in the morning or in the afternoon. I personally believe that proximity is power. I know that more positions are remote, but I don't think that anything can really replace currently, when Adam has a really great idea and pops into my office and just wants to kind of download that, or quickly, tell me about some, employee issue that might be going on that we need to go fix immediately. Yes, you can get on the phone, but it's really just not the same. We use a tool called the 5 daily accountability questions. Adam's going to talk about that in a second. And then this is a big one, is training the internal and external stakeholders to go to your executive assistant first. This doesn't happen overnight. It usually is about like 6-month process, I would say. Adam was always very supportive of transferring people over to me, and that's how it worked in the beginning was, yep, just go talk to Hallie. Hallie will get that scheduled for you. Hallie will do that for you, and he just CC'd me on stuff. And it probably took like 6 months, and then people no longer went to Adam. So really getting your executives buy-in on that and giving them the tools and the process for how to train people to go to you instead. And I think that's just helped streamline communication all across the business.
That's great. So we mentioned behavior and personality assessments. So there's a bunch of different behavioral personality assessments you can do. I mean, DISC profiles out there. You have the Clifton Strengths, the Myers-Briggs. A lot of people are probably somewhat familiar with some sort of personality assessment. Remember, they're not tests. People always say, what did you get in the personality test? A test means that you pass and fail, right? Personality assessments are just that. They're your natural behavior. They're how you're behaving, right? The reason why you use these in a workplace environment is because, look, if you are and people can fake these things in terms of fake a behavior, or they can take on a role that they don't really like, and for even 2 to 3 years. But after a period of time, this is kind of like think of the analogies, like if you have a rubber band that is the right behavioral fit, it's just got enough pressure, right? It's just there. But then if you need to step on the gas, the rubber band can stretch without breaking, right? So you're right behavioral fit. They're getting energy from what they're doing and how they're ingrained in your world, and they can stretch. Now, if somebody's faking this or in the wrong behavioral seat, remember, it's not just important to get the people on the bus. It's important to get the people on the bus and then make sure they're in the right seats. And you may do this multiple times throughout organizations. I mean, Hallie, think about not just way back in the beginning, we switched Hallie around in her roles way back then, but we've done this throughout organizations that we own just constantly. Like, you're evaluating, does this director of marketing need to be a CEO, right? Like, does this person really go work in financial aspects and let go of the operational things? Like, you're constantly evaluating where people fit behaviorally and in the right seat, especially as your organization grows. So as you gain that, so if somebody's in the wrong seat, if you think about the rubber band's bam, right out to the max. And so they can operate that way for a period of time, but then the minute, something's not going right and it starts to go downhill, which I know shockingly happens, right? At least to me on a daily basis. And when you press the gas and you try to push that, they snap, meaning they're just too overwhelmed. They can't do with this. They quit. They miss mistakes. These team things that happen. We actually just happened. We had that's why you create a world large enough you can keep people on the bus. We just had an employee on the BlackRock side who basically came to us and was having issues with just being able to keep up with his current job, and he wanted to leave. And this just happened last week. And we basically sat down with him and figured out he loved the company, loved being with us and everything he wanted to do. So we actually repositioned him on the bus into a different position where he's much more in line with what he wants. It's a come in at 7:30 and you could punch out at 4, and it's in line with that. And so we're you always kind of got to evaluate where your employees are, especially if they want to stay. And so we're happy to be able to make that transition for them. And then how I want you to take this is figure out if you're, and this is coming from the founder, Hallie can maybe mention it from the force multiplier standpoint, but you need to figure out who it is that you need, right? Do you really need a personal assistant? Do you need an EA? Do you need a chief of staff, right? And sure, you can have your own definition of what those jobs are, but using a personality behavioral assessment, first understanding what it is that you need, and then figuring out what best behavior is going to work for that, right? I mean, Hallie would be an amazing personal assistant, but she would hate it, right? She would not do that. And she did parts of this for a while coming through there. And that was one of the first things that she wanted. She wanted to move on to more of the business side of force multiplication, right? Into a world. Whereas so figure out what it is that you really need, meaning, and the way I would look at this is, what is in the bucket of my head that things that are not getting done? Like there's always this bucket in your head, right? That's like, oh man, I don't want to do that. You're kind of putting it off and you end up putting more things in that bucket. Take that bucket out of your mind, put it on a piece of paper and say, all of these things are really important to get done. I just have like paralysis where it comes to actually doing these things. So I need to pause and stop. So that's the key to using personality assessments.
Yeah, and that goes for founders and also the EAs and chiefs that are on the call, that you can create that list too, and then that's your next hire.
There you go.
And just one other thing on this, most executives have the EA's behavioral assessment and understands their behavior, but I was talking to a bunch of EAs recently and very few of them actually had the behavioral profile of their executive. So if you don't have their behavioral profile, have them go take an assessment, study theirs if they've got it, because you need to understand them so you understand how to ask questions and how to leave them.
5 questions daily. This is something from both sides. Is really powerful. I like to get these as you're leading multiple organizations or just multiple people. You ever notice that everyone has a different perspective of an event? And so I always look at the 5 daily questions for a couple of reasons. One is you just need to see where people are at mentally, right? And so you can see with the questions, we ask very pointed questions that get emailed to you. If you're leading the person that's there, that person's emailing you every day and it works on from each division in your organization. These questions so that you can see where people had successes, where they're struggling with, how can you overcome these things? And most importantly, if there's a problem in your organization, which does show up, you're getting multiple questions from different people and you're seeing different angles from there. The first one you may get, you go, wow, that person's doing that, that's crazy. And you get it from that person, you're going, huh. All right, so then you get to triangulate all of this information and make the best decision with clarity, not emotionally. So you gather all of this information and you can make decisions that way. The other thing is this is just a great tool for the person filling it out to kind of have a process of just getting. It's like a journaling. It's like a forced journaling method to be able to get these things out there, and somebody can read them, and you responding to them. You're taking them serious. You're not responding. You're not sharing this with anybody, and you're just part of seeing who they are. If you're seeing patterns, if somebody's always an 8, right? We get this a lot for number 4 is, on a scale of 1 to 10, where you're at. If somebody's always an 8, some people will always be a 10, right? Some people will always be a 6, right? And they're not that low, but like a 7 or 8. And some people will never be there. But if they're an 8 and they are coming in at a 7 and then a 6, you might want to just pull them in and say, okay, what's going on here, right? What's the trigger there? And they may not even see it. Your job as a leader is to unstuck people, right? So you need to see the information before they can even see it as well too and look in their wording. Hallie, anything to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is for executive assistants who tell me that my executive doesn't know what I do all day. This is a great way for you to, in a structured format, to each day give them a recap of what you're doing, what you're working on, what's going well, what's not, and then before issues kind of fester or become bigger, you can, just nip them in the bud and have a conversation about them before they become bigger issues. And it's just a good daily touch point, I think.
That's great.
Okay, so I know we're getting close to running out of time, so we're going to probably skip over a couple of slides here, but I will send you some additional resources on some of the slides in a minute that we're going to skip over. But Here are some really basic communication skills for force multipliers. If you haven't read the book Fierce Conversations, definitely go get a copy of that. It really gives you a framework and a format for how to engage in those conversations with particularly with your executive. Executives could certainly benefit from that book as well, but I know that sometimes it's more difficult when you're the employee to go have those hard conversations with your boss. Maximizing your CEO's reach with internal and external stakeholders is a really key skill to have as a force multiplier. That's through memos, maybe you're organizing a town hall, newsletters, scheduling frequent communication with the company on behalf of your executive. Understanding what you can and cannot say is really critical. That's coming from that trust in the very beginning, and really understanding what your executive has for priorities and what's important to them, so that you, again, know what you can and cannot say on their behalf. And developing strong relationships before you need them is a really key skill of a force multiplier. That's like making sure you build a great relationship with the concierge at one of your executive's favorite hotels, right? Because at some point you're probably going to need a favor from them, or a strong relationship with other business members in the community. Remaining calm and objective is critical. Working through your emotional intelligence, there's a lot of resources on that, but being an emotional intelligent leader is really key. Committing to mastering the art of the fierce conversation, and that's really just not being afraid to have a difficult conversation, and understanding that you might get emotional, they might get emotional, but that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's about what the topic at hand is and how to actually take some of the emotions out of it. Hone your written and communication skills and public speaking skills, very, very key in the force multiplier position. Understanding the right method to deliver the message, both to your executive and to stakeholders throughout the organization. Knowing what questions to ask, really key to get the information. I hear sometimes from EAs like, well, they didn't tell me that. Well, it's because you didn't ask the question and the way to get the information that you needed to continue to move forward on whatever project you're working on. And then, of course, the most important communication skill for anybody is to listen. And I will challenge you with this question: what conversation are you currently avoiding? It's probably with your executive. This is for EA. And then what conversation do you really need to have? And then I, again, will challenge you to, by the end of the week, go schedule that conversation and then email me and tell me what it was and how it went. Again, most important meeting is between the EA, or the founder, and the force multiplier. This is the cornerstone of a lot of the stuff that happens in the business, is that meeting. And the second you start canceling that meeting, it does send a signal to your EA that they're really not that important, yet they're also devoting their life to you. So most important meeting. Adam, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, well, it's also it's one of those ones that you think that you can just push off and not happen. And it's also, as Hallie said, it's one of the most important ones, because you need to see, it helps you if you have a right force multiplier. The force multiplier is going to be removing things. If you're really busy, you have to move something, they may be able to help you out with a lot of things that you're not seeing. And that's a powerful way of doing it. So hold the meeting, even if you have to condense it a little bit, and just get that conversation in there, and just and get things out of that bucket that's in your head into other people, so you can continue to move forward the week a lot easier than being stuck having to do everything yourself.
Okay, I have other resources on this, guy, so I will send you some resources on how to get your boss to give up control, or you can grab a copy of our book, and there's a bunch of stuff in there. Just for the sake of time, because we could go on and on about all of that. Adam, do you want to tell them about our online training?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. So we're super excited. We've gotten a lot of feedback from our book, and people have asked for more information about how they coach with us. And certainly we can't coach one-on-one with everybody. So we are launching an online training that starts May 22nd for individuals. We're in the founders and the executives and executive assistants or chief in your force multipliers. We're really excited about this. We're really going to be breaking down the book. The webinar series is going to be Hallie and I, so you get to hear it in different directions. When you sign up for it, you get 2 books, one for your founder and one for the force multiplier, and whatever that relationship looks like for you, so that you can create these fierce conversations between you and your partner, to create that first slide that we talked about, that strategic partnership, that person that you can continue to count on to build your organization and move forward. So we're going to break down a lot of this in the 4-week course starting May 22nd to really help people get beyond where they're at and give them a framework, models, tools, and systems to utilize these things to engage in the conversations that are going to change the direction of your business and of your life.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. They'll also have, anyone who signs up is also going to have access to me and Adam by email if you have really specific challenges that you have going on in your organization. So you will be able to get a little bit of more individualized coaching as well by email from us throughout the 4 weeks.
Awesome.
And for those of you who haven't gotten a copy of Audible yet, although we've got a ton of people ordering that book already, which is really cool, but we are giving away 5 free copies of the Audible version of The Founder and the Force Multiplier. After this call, I will send out a link and you guys can just enter your information, and we are taking entries until May 17th, and then we'll announce the winners on May 20th. With that, and I do have one question here, Adam. I'll have you answer this. And if anyone else has questions, post them in the little comment box. But here's the one question we got from Jason. As your companies have grown, how has the frequency of communication evolved?
Well, you know what? It's, when you were talking about communication earlier, it's as the company has grown, Hallie, you've just become more as a strategic partner with all of our businesses. And so if people are going to you first, you're mostly in the loop for everything that's happening. And then you talk to that one meeting that you have, and also the 5 daily questions that people are sending in. You kind of get a pulse for what they're working on, and then you can respond in keeping people in communication. The other thing that Hallie does, she goes through and reads all of my emails constantly, just on multiple times throughout a day, and it's constantly in my inbox just as much. So she's seeing all the information that happens, and she's kind of understanding what needs to take priority and what doesn't. And if she's not clear, then we kind of make sure that we get clear on that as well too. So the frequency, part of it is just becoming lockstep with your force multiplier from my situation, right? You create that so that that proximity is power. You're just having that quick conversation. In the emails, they're also Hallie reads pretty much the same books, whether she likes them or not, that I'm reading as well too, to understand where I'm thinking, because when you read a book, it changes your thinking strategically that way. So there's just a lot of little things that Hallie does to stay in lockstep with our thinking, so that when I do have a decision that we need to make, she's not trying to catch up to speed on that.
Yeah, and as far as I don't even know if we communicated more frequently in the beginning. Like, we really only have our Monday meeting, and then the 5 daily questions. Maybe we communicate by email on a couple of things, like if maybe I need clarity or just with other leaders in the company, but we're not really like sitting around talking every day.
No, we're out doing things.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So I didn't see any other questions. Again, I'm going to send out an email after the call with a bunch of resources. You can email me back if you do have a specific question. And we have another webinar next week, actually, that Amy and I are doing together. Amy's our executive assistant, and we're going to talk about the difference between EA and a chief of staff, and maybe who you need on your team or in your organization. And then join us on May 22nd for our online coaching program.